Born to be bad and on the run. I never make it as none. I've got this itch I need to scratch. No single man could be my match. Yeah, this never-ending thirst over all else must come first. And I know one day I'll pay. Infernal hell will be my stay. Yeah, I got to get the guys. Get the guys. I got to get the guys. Get the guys. Can't take it anymore. Become at such a bore. This deeper yearning within me cries. First cry and then the fall. I'm gonna risk it all. Just can't say no. Got to get the guys. 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 No second chance, no turning back. My soul is dark, the veil black. If bad is good and sin is in, the evil side will always win. Yeah, I got to get the guys. I got to get the guys. Get the guys, can't take it anymore. Becoming such a bore. This deeper yearning within me cries. First pride and then the fall. I'm gonna risk it all. Just can't say no. Got to get the guys. Get the guys. Get the guys. Get the guys. Get the guys bleeding up. Get the guys bleeding up. Get the guys. Get the guys.
Hello, hi, welcome to another episode of Unprotected Texts. I'm Matt.
And I'm Jacob.
And this time we are going to dunk on The Monk by Matt Lewis. Putting it succinctly, it takes place in Madrid in basically the same time period as when he wrote it. Yeah. So you have to figure late 18th century. It's not it's not even like earlier than when Matthew Lewis was alive and writing and working, but it takes place in Madrid, and it follows the degradation and fall into iniquity of a particular monk named Ambrosio, who is the talk of the town in Madrid.
Ain't he just?
He was. Several other B characters are involved. And there are subplots, but they all sort of interweave and intersect in Volume 3, the last part.
They come together in a Coen Brothers-esque way, except less satisfying.
Yes.
What did we learn, Palmer?
I don't know, sir.
I don't fucking know either.
It has been on my radar for the better part of 2 years because it was used in the reading list of one of the classes for comp lit that's taught at
Brigham Young
University. That was the first time I had been aware of it, and it was in a class in the comp lit department for the dark side of the Enlightenment. So libertine literature and horror and gothic fiction in the era of the Enlightenment, which we think of as being like intellectually progressive and finding new ways to better the worst off in society, new ways of government, like the enlightened despot.
Exactly. I mean, I'd never heard of it. or Matthew Lewis at all, or Matthew the Monk Lewis, as apparently he became named after the publication of this book. And I was intrigued. I was honestly looking forward to it because you're like, oh, it's salacious. It's got torture. And this is before Matt had read it, so he didn't know. It's got torture. It's got ghosts. It's got violence. It's got sexual acts of depravity. Most foul.
Lewd, lascivious, salacious, outrageous.
Absolutely. Like, got it. Started reading it. I gotta be honest. This was an obligation read. I didn't hate it completely.
Okay.
I didn't hate it.
But you're gonna dunk.
I'm gonna dunk a little bit on it. It comes from two things, basically. One being, it's old. Sorry, that can't be helped.
Okay, but it's not like you hate everything written before.
No, absolutely not. I love
30.
Candide. I think Candide holds up.
Okay.
Mwah. But I'm gonna back up a little bit and just say, I'm really glad that we've learned a lot about how to write things.
That's true.
Since this came along. Because I guess this was pretty well praised or like poured over when it came out.
I don't know about praise.
Well, criticized. It was criticized.
It was talked about.
It was talked about.
A lot.
I guess this whole book is just really full of itself.
Okay. Well, it is worth mentioning at this point that when he started writing it, he was 18. When it was published, he was 20.
He claims to write it in 10 weeks, by the way.
Which is bullshit. He started in 1792, dropped it, like let it fester, trunk novel. Everyone has one. It was like a project he was sitting on for a while, and then after reading The Mysteries of Udolpho by Radcliffe,
which I now have to read,
he was like, ooh, I'm gonna finish. And then it took 10 weeks. But it wasn't like start to finish 10 weeks.
Right. Yeah, he, I'm just gonna say this too, this is a good point to bring up. I have a new theory about the world that this book gave me, so I can thank it for that. 20-year-olds are always the same. And they always have been.
And they always get published.
They always get published. 20-year-old well-connected white boys get published, no matter what the fuck they write.
That's true.
That has been true 200 years ago. It's still true today.
So at what point did you realize that this was going to be a sunken cost?
Once every side character that got introduced had like 15 pages of backstory that doesn't matter.
Okay.
I was like, this is really boring. We should say there's two stories. There's two. We got the monk and we got Don Raymond and
Agnes,
who are in a Romeo and Juliet.
And Agnes's brother Lorenzo is in love with Antonia.
Yes.
Who is a ward of Don Raymond.
Exactly. So you got this already kind of connected, but then it kind of falls away for a little bit. Those connections kind of matter.
There's a toggling.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way to put it. Even the Bleeding Nun's got like a goddamn backstory, even though I don't need it. I just need her to be a bleeding
But that's
nun.
part of the spooky.
But the spooky is...
That's where the spooky is.
No, but the spooky is me not knowing.
Okay.
For me.
Then that's a different type of scary. I would conjecture, and this is coming from Radcliffe herself, I would conjecture that the difference between terror and horror, terror is an ambiguity and a submission to the sublime and the unknowableness of any sort of element or person or story. Horror is a description, and it leaves very little to the imagination, and it is a catalog of atrocities.
Sure.
This is a horror. This is not a terror.
That's fair. I don't disagree with that discrimination, that delineation. I just prefer one over the other.
Okay.
I've witnessed in my life a million iterations of simulations of murder and death. I'm gonna play some of my favorites here.
They sucked his brains out.
Desaad has said that, I'm going to butcher this quote, so I'll just say it like this.
Let us conquer that this kind of fiction, whatever one may think of it, is assuredly not without merit. 'Twas the inevitable result of the revolutionary shocks which all of Europe has suffered.
Well, we have maybe witnessed hundreds of thousands of people fall to their fake deaths.
Yeah.
They saw, people every day saw much more death than the average American citizen. So however desensitized we think we are, I've yet to see in real life a murder. I was underwhelmed by the violence in this, and for the time it was supposedly shocking and terrible.
Right.
Yet at the time there was actual, much more horrendous violence, witnessed by everyday citizens, much more casually.
I mean, sure, there's a lot of simulation and fake deaths, but we've also seen, like on TV, real deaths.
Oh,
I mean,
for sure.
Not that I love America, but I still cry when I watch 9/11 footage. That was real. We all lived through that, and that was horrible.
He thinks 9/11 was real. Sucker. Was it just because you weren't supposed to do those things in a book? Were books more sacred? Or was the medium more tame?
I don't think that there's anything inherent about the written script that's supposed to be sacrosanct.
Well, then why throw a tizzy? Because you got people reading this being like, this is, oh my word! And then they'll go down the street and watch some dude get beheaded and get surrounded by blood and go, ha 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 ha!
Maybe they just believed that their literature was supposed to inspire them to better things. I mean, that's sort of been like, for many years, that was supposed to be the raison d'etre for opera. Like, it's these stories of myths and gods and heroes from ancient times played out on a stage with music, and that's supposed to inspire some sort of lesson. I think that's just the way people are, because people always get in a tizzy about whatever medium.
Yeah, more people are definitely mad about, like, the ending of Star Wars than the current state of the current police action toward, like, the Black Lives Matter movement. I think probably the same amount of people are mad, if not less. So maybe that is true. Media affects us, guys. I kept hearing people be like, "Oh, this book's insane with the torture. It's insane." I mean, it happens. He gets tortured, but for as wordy as all the other parts.
I mean, if I would say that there's more torture if we broaden the definition of torture, because there's a lot of yearning going on. There's a lot of unfulfilled desires.
That's true.
It's full of it.
A lot of blue.
The plot moves along at quite a clip. Like, a lot does happen.
There is a ton.
Don Raymond's story, where he's telling Lorenzo, like, why he dropped off the face of the earth and, like, appeared to abandon Agnes to the life in the convent. That was long, but a lot happened. It could have been shortened, but a lot happened.
Yeah, but it didn't. But did it matter? You got two reasons to put words on a page, essentially. Let's just cut and dry this. Two reasons to put words on a page. One, tell a story that is interesting and exciting to the reader. Two, make it thematically poignant.
Okay.
Or make it support the themes of the actions of the
I would argue that his story within a story does fit into the theme, which is to say continent bad, England good. You'll notice that none of this bullshit happens in England.
Oh, it's all in Spain.
Spain, France, and Germany.
It's all, all those heathenist bad news. Actually, it was a very good introduction. I will give shout-outs to
you did read the intro?
I went back and read it, and it's really solid. Introduction by Christopher McLachlan. Great job. It's one of those great intros where it does just enough to illuminate the text, but also I found myself really agreeing with him about the book. I was like, oh damn! The narrator's tone is also easy to relate to what we might suppose the young Lewis was like. Brash, jaunty, eager to please, anxious to seem adult and knowing, but more often immature in a taste and judgment, which I think is pretty apt to the text itself. Though this at least makes it for a pleasing freedom from hidebound attitudes and refreshing willingness to take risk or be risque, there are surely characteristics of a young man of talent and ambition, not quite sure of himself, and rather overdoing the effort to impress.
Okay.
Which I completely agree with. The things that happen in the book, I feel like he's only writing them because he thinks we're supposed to go like, oh! Oh! Like when, I guess spoilers, sure. When the bleeding nun reveals herself to Raymond the second time to be like, and I'm the nun, not your betrothed. We are the reader supposed to go like, oh! You know? This guy must have been a complete asshole to be around. Firstly.
Well, he was an MP.
He was an MP. He was from a wealthy family.
Daddy set him up.
Daddy set him up. He had a plantation in Jamaica with 400 slaves. That, well, he was for abolition in Britain. He was for abolition for everyone else who wanted slaves.
Right.
He didn't want
Yeah.
to free his slaves.
Right. He thought the ship had left the port for like people who were already enslaved.
Yeah.
He was like, don't bother.
Don't bother. They're already slaves. What are you gonna do? And he, you know, a brash 20-year-old, he says there, looking to write something shocking and grab your attention.
But it's not like that from the jump, though.
No, I will say
Because this is one thing that I sort of expected and was not necessarily disappointed, but I had to like rearrange my expectations. It's not like Faust.
Yes.
Wherein Act 1, they make the deal and it only gets worse from there, between the devil and Faust.
This must have been Faustian inspired, right?
Oh, sure.
Good
I mean,
to-
like, it's in the air.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, he traveled in Germany. He was aware of, like,
Okay.
folk tales and oral histories of that sort of thing.
Cool.
It's not like that. Like, the devil only really comes up at like, literally the last 10 pages.
Yes.
So if you're thinking that it's going to be, like, an adventure with black magic where he, like, gets a book and he, like, scrapbooks his favorite spells or whatever, and
One
is,
of those-
like... causing running amok in Madrid.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Cthulhu, 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 Cthulhu. Yeah!
It is pretty gruesome, a lot of the things, but it doesn't like start there and it's like 100 the whole time.
No, it does start slow, and the opening is.
And like I said, that a lot does happen.
A lot happens to the point where I honestly forget a good chunk of side quests.
Like Transformers.
Like Transformers! I just don't remember who peed on who. You had said early on when we were reading this book.
Right.
You came to me and you said, I'm 25 pages in, I think I know what kind of book this is.
Right.
Now, you didn't tell me what kind of book you thought this was.
Right.
Do you care to elaborate now?
I can. You mean I never told you? I thought.
No, I don't know. No, I've lived in this horrible mystery.
Okay.
This terror.
I had this feeling that that the book is sort of like YA before YA was a thing.
Well, it was written by a YA.
Basically, yes. So our previous episode was The Turn of the Screw.
Yes.
Which we both agree was an excellent book.
Marvelous.
I do not hold it up to the same level of literary merit. Which is not to say that all YA is bad or all proto-YA like this.
We're not gonna. Yeah.
Like a lot of YA, it's more emotionally driven and not so much character or prose. And again, kind of relies on the plot to move things along
That's
and
fair.
to maintain the interest. You were saying that you felt that each character's backstory and their family history and how they got to the point where we're meeting them in the narrative is long-winded or unnecessary or annoying. So I think that points not necessarily to the fact that it was not needed, but I think it speaks more to a frustration on your part that you feel like you don't know who these people are. You don't feel like they're fully drawn out.
No.
Which is just to say that these are not so much characters and fully fleshed literary beings that Matthew Lewis spent time to create himself.
Yeah.
They are instead borrowed inventions and archetypes from other Gothic fiction
Absolutely.
that he's supplanting into
Yes,
here.
absolutely. Which makes very much a lot of sense because that's what you do when you're a young writer. I mean, I have thousands of unfinished manuscripts that are all garbage from when I was young. Absolutely, but it was the same because whatever I was reading at the time, I would just supplant into what I was writing. You know, I feel like it's a very common practice for a lot of young writers. He just happened to hit it big because Daddy had money.
I don't want to say they're cliche, because I do feel like that there are shades and variations between the characters. Like Agnes is not the same as Antonia, is not
Very
the same
much.
as Virginia. Lorenzo's not the same as Raymond.
Yes.
They do have differentiations.
Yes.
I do not feel as if they've lived a full life.
When we meet them, usually this is how it goes. They're going on this journey, you meet them, then you are immediately told why you should care about them. And this, to put into a screenplay methodology, is bad writing, and it works for books too that way. You know, you don't meet a lot of modern books, and again, this goes back to how we now know a lot more. I don't know. I feel like we actually did learn about storytelling. Turns out literary criticism is a valid field. You can't just spout at someone a bunch of exposition or a bunch of backstory and be like, care about this person now. You have to show them, like, actions do speak louder than words, even in an entirely wordy thing. So you have to show and create and weave in, show people interacting with each other. If you're just going layers of essentially flashbacks, you're not going to connect as well. And I think that's why those parts really seem to drag, is because we're just getting this isolated chunk of a story, and it feels very separate from the rest of the narratives.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Well said.
But cool.
Well said. My favorite character was Matilda.
Naturally.
Does that make sense to you?
Naturally.
The corruptress. And what sealed the deal for me was towards the end, when Ambrosio was remembering how she blue-balled him when she realized that he was no longer into her and wanted Antonia.
Yeah.
And he's remembering how Matilda rejected him, even though she still was going to help him in corrupting and raping this girl.
Yeah.
He remembers her saying, "I am no prostitute, Ambrosio. I am now no more than your friend and will not be your mistress. Cease then to solicit my complying with desires, which insult me." And I just think to myself, of all the times that I wish I had just like said that to a couple of goons on some apps, the power that has. We have no choice but to stand. Did you have a character that you liked?
I actually did kind of like the pretty much Raymond and Lorenzo as a gang. I don't know. It was like the one part of the story I was kind of broskies. Yeah. Broskies getting hoskies. I was really compelled, more so, by their adventure. It felt more adventure-y because it wasn't just a quest to bound and rape someone, which is brash, but that's what it is. And I know it's for, like, shock value, and it's like, schlocky almost.
No, but it also it falls in line with, it is partially shock value, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
I do think it does, part of it is the fact that he was young and trying to, like, make a name for himself.
Yeah.
But part of it is also the Catholic thing.
And if there's a reason to read this book, it is to chew on this. The way that sex and the Catholic Church are portrayed in this novel is actually kind of interesting. More so than kind of interesting. I'm going to talk about it now. I talked to Matt about it now.
Do.
That's how interesting it is.
Why I'm
You're
here.
gonna watch it. Wherever on the scale of feminism we are now, is clearly not where this book was operating on, which is to be expected, honestly. What's surprising is that they have sexual desires, and it's not always bad that they have sexual desires. That's the most interesting part of the story, is when he's playing with those sexual tropes of, and admittedly I'm stealing this from, I think, maybe even the introduction of that, but I read it a couple places, of the veil, and when she lifts the veil, it's like, surprise, you had naughty sex with the naughty thing. But Lorenzo and Agnes aren't punished. I mean, I guess technically they are, but they're not narratively, like by the judge of the narrator, punished for their actions. Whereas, of course, Matilda and even like her aunt, not her aunt, Antonia's aunt, who's like
Leonella?
Yeah. Who's like, give me that bushy.
And Jacintha, who is the landlady for Elvira Antonia.
Yeah.
She's portrayed as like a stupid old biddy, a superstitious stupid old biddy, who is not married but suddenly wants a man to protect her from the bad ghosty.
Yeah, absolutely. The Catholic Church is portrayed as this thing bad because it represses sexual things, but then you still have iterations of sex being bad throughout the rest of the book, but not in the ways you might expect.
My mind went straight away to Henry VIII and the dissolution of the monasteries that he did when he wanted to divorce his wife. And was like, you have money, it's mine now. Su casa y mi casa. It's ironic, because Spain. I thought that what Lewis was calling and hearkening back toward was more, like at that point, almost 300 years ago. I did not realize that it was as recent as the Gordon riots of 1780. Did you hear about these?
Not to know.
So there was this guy, Lord Gordon, who put together a petition to walk back some of the protections for Catholics that had been passed into law just a couple of years earlier. So Catholics were basically second-hand citizens or second-class citizens in England for centuries.
Yeah.
But in 1778, they passed a law that granted a few protections and more rights and whatever. And then this guy Gordon was like, hell no, not on this island. That tension between Protestant and Catholic was even more recently seated than I thought it was. Again, I only learned more of specific examples of sexualized Catholicism in literature from the same introduction in the Oxford edition. So talking about a couple of other examples of earlier 18th century writings that use the same archetypes of the lecherous monk or the nun who is basically a dominatrix over her wards and that sort of thing.
Yep. I guess this is like one of the early like nun as a sexy dominatrix we get. So thank you for that.
Which is, again, to say, yes, this was very much his own product because he was him at this time with his own circumstances in life, being as young as he was, writing this way. But it does also still fit into a broader trajectory of transgressive fiction.
That's true.
Specifically from the English with regards to nunnery and popery. And some buffoonery and goonery. De Sade, our homeboy, De Sade, praised it and pointed to it in his literary essays and criticisms about literature of the time and what was being published during the Revolutionary years. I would argue that De Sade did a better job of things and has more staying power in the literary canon. De Sade influenced Lewis because Lewis visited France in 1791, probably read Justine, which had just been published.
Oh, okay, cool. I was wondering how that lined up.
So he was aware of De Sade, and De Sade eventually became aware of him. Oh, did you have a chronology?
No.
I had a chronology.
Ooh.
It turns out that after the Napoleonic Wars and everything, Lewis traveled in the continent, and he met in Switzerland Percy Shelley, Mary Shelley, Byron, and Pidori.
Oh.
What were they doing in Switzerland? About to write Frankenstein.
Okay, wow. That's pretty cool.
I was like, gag, bitch. Oh,
what?
Bitch.
What?
Okay, so remember at the store today when I was like, this music is going to come up later?
Yeah. Oh, right. We forgot all about that. How many minutes did we record and not even mention
Almost
that?
an hour. Towards the front, and especially during the Bleeding Nun episode, where Don Raymond doesn't realize that he carried off a literal bleeding nun specter instead of his beloved.
Yes.
So much of that, and the way that people react, it was just so artificial, I felt. So in that episode, that story within a story, I started to think to myself, without having read any of the criticism or the introduction or anything, I started thinking to myself, is this camp? Like, can this be camp?
Yeah.
Like, is this like their version of like a B movie or a C movie late night?
I had
so at first I thought this was camp, and I started to sort of look for more signs of artifice propped up as exemplary, which is one of the many tenets of camp outlined by Susan. The music from Gone Girl, that track I was playing, and also Why So Serious from The Dark Knight.
Yeah, and let's play these here, and 3, 2, 1.
In my mind, when Ambrosio was murdering Elvira, like particularly the way that he did it with suffocation, I had that soundtrack like
Ooh.
that like repetitive, like
Yeah.
suddenly building tension sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's when I really thought that the horror kicked in, and
Sure.
that this truly became a horror novel.
Sure. It's still snarky to me a little bit. Maybe it's because I have this image in my head that I couldn't dissociate, even from early on
Of,
in
like,
the book.
if Holden Caulfield wrote a book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like Chuck Palahniuk, you know, where he's just where you wonder where his actual morals lie, and whether he's just doing this to shock you or push your buttons, and whether he's trying to actually say something. Or it could be both. You know, they're not mutually exclusive. I felt that some of the parts that were meant to be taken seriously were undermined by the camp factor, and the parts that were really meant to be campy felt undermined by them not being campy enough. It's like the parental advisory sticker. Remember those?
Right, yes.
Where it would
Yeah,
be
yeah,
like,
yeah.
these things are disgusting. Meanwhile, half of us are pedophiles, but this rap artist can't sing his songs, so we're gonna put...
That's a very good point.
Well, I'm
that's,
just-
that's beautiful.
I'm just saying, yeah.
So here's one other question.
Yes.
As I was reading this, not only did I realize that it's sort of the proto-YA, but I thought to myself, this basically reads like a play. Like,
Yeah.
it
Oh, totally.
It would probably be, you'd have to trim some of the fat. My suspicions and my feelings on that were confirmed when I realized that Matthew Lewis was basically a playwright most of his life.
Most
This
of
is
his life.
really the only fiction
Absolutely.
he wrote.
Absolutely.
So it would probably be better suited to the stage. And if the adage is true,
The
by
world to stage.
Marshall McLuhan.
that the medium is the message, then
Yeah.
what's the message of the book as opposed to his gothic horror plays?
That's a good point. And it's hard because I really am trying to put it in the time. Like, the novel as it existed in the time is different than the novel as it exists
And
now.
it is also worth mentioning that it was right before Jane Austen started publishing and
That's
writing.
true.
So often people think England in Revolutionary years and Napoleonic years, it's Jane Austen and nothing
Yeah.
else. So
Yeah.
this presents another side
Yeah.
to the Republic of Letters.
True. I mean, I don't like the idea of canon being so sacrosanct in general, so I'm not really going to defend this is place to not be in it, even though I didn't particularly like it. I'm certainly not going to say it should be, like, removed from classes or whatever. I mean, it's interesting to talk about, and it brings up a lot of interesting things. Obviously, Austen was a lot better writer.
Sure, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to say
Yeah.
that.
She wrote people.
She wrote human beings. This wrote puppets. But the theater thing is a good point because there are so many moments where it did feel like you could hear the soliloquy. You could hear the actor.
Cue thunder.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say that this is worth reading as counter-revolutionary English reaction to Continent Bad. To French people
Sure.
killing themselves.
Sure. To those
That's,
crazy.
that's
people
ultimately
like that.
why
Yeah.
this is worth, like, it sort of, it's like D-level canon. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do recommend it, not full-throatedly like Turn of the Screw, but I do recommend it, especially if you're interested in late 18th century English writing.
Sure.
Although I would highly recommend, in conjunction with it, reading The Mysteries of Udolpho and reading a contemporary account of the Years of Terror in the French Revolution, 12 Who Ruled by R.R. Palmer,
I've been meaning to read that.
published by PU Press. A fantastic account of the Reign of Terror, and really
Yeah.
helps put the broader perspective of what was happening, and really drawing the eye of all of Europe
Yeah.
at the time. So take it with those, I think.
Take it with food,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yes, basically.
Don't take it
Not
on an empty
straight.
stomach.
I think in Matthew Lewis's mind, he meant it to be a morality novel, and he meant it to be like, make people be like, wow, it really makes you think. We live in a society.
Yes. It is the Joker of Gothic fiction.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining this Monk Dunk. Tune in next week for the nun pun.
If you would like to follow us on social media, which you can do through your very own telephone that you're probably holding right now.
On the John.
On the John, which is honestly probably the best place to watch this particular episode. If you are on the toilet right now,
Comment below.
Right. Let us
Please
know.
tell us.
Let us know.
We wanna-
Let
we
us
wanna
know.
take a poll.
And then right when this ends, you can see the time code. Right when this ends, just flash. Like, just time it with the credits. You can do so at Instagram at unprotected.texts.
And on Twitter at unprotectedtext.
Yes. And of course, there'll be podcast versions of all the previous episodes, and later, in hopefully some reasonable amount of time, this episode at unprotectedtext.libsyn.com.
Still not on Spotify, baby.
Still not on Spotify. Until next time, if you're gonna run from yourself,
At least bring a book.
Don't eat fat and